standings. So there were 6 players that were able to take a draw. We have 4 players left playing 2 matches to determine the last 2 spots. And one of them is Ben Unger, who we saw last round defeat May French. Unfortunately, had the lowest tiebreakers of the 6 ones. So he's in the unfortunate situation of having to play this match out. But the good news for him, if he's able to win it, he will have a higher seeding and be able to be on the play more often in our top 8 rounds.
Hey, that's a good way to look at it. Not just in a glass half full way, but a very real way. That matters a lot when it comes. We've seen throughout, these rounds that play draw matters a lot, especially when you see something like this. Another aggressive start from Ben with 3 creatures in play on turn 2.
Yeah, and playing against Sean Gallagher on Azorius Control, who we saw earlier in the day defeat Wesley Hickman in round 4. So was one of the players who picked up a draw last round, unsurprisingly.
Yeah, shocker.
Gonna look to end this match either way. Neither player wanting a draw here. Well, actually, Ben I think would be okay with a draw. I take that back.
That's fair. Yeah, you not be a very restful draw before the top 8, but you just take your top 8s however you can get them.
Yeah. This is a very different matchup for Ben than we saw last round against May on Gruul Aggro. The other end of the spectrum here in Azorius Control. He's going to have to marshal all of the sort of grinding capabilities of this deck and really leverage the card advantage engines of Enduring Curiosity and Kaito Bane of Nightmares.
So no board wipe from Sean to deal with the early flood of creatures. Instead, it's a get lost followed by suspending or impending, I suppose, the Overlord, making a stream of blockers, which is a pretty good way to deal with the 1/1s and 2/2s and all of that Ben wants to attack with.
And with Ben stuck on 2 lands here, he can't deploy Kaito or Enduring Curiosity, so it's really just about lining up creatures that can rumble in combat against this Otter and a Spyglass Siren. So the insect tokens from Overlord of the Mistmoors, they are up to the task.
Yeah, a land and a Kaito over the last couple turns, obviously, for Ben would have been huge. It not happening even after going exploring with those map tokens, pretty rough. He does get the trade out of Sean or the blocks, but without being able to meaningfully add to the board, he's able to, throw down a Nightmare to pick off a card from Sean. But this is now a possibility for the corner turn for Sean because he's got a life total at a reasonable spot. He's got mana open. He's got an Overlord ticking down, and I guess now he has a second Overlord ticking down.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of great answers to these Overlords in the main deck for Ben Unger. He has 2 copies that go for the throat. He can bounce them with This Town Ain't Big Enough, but that is only a play that's going to work if Ben is able to apply a lot more pressure to Sean's life total, because he will eventually redeploy the Overlords and make a lot more insects.
Well, so Ben has found his Darksplit Shores here. So he is still thinking about it. Now, I'm not sure that necessarily unlocks anything on this turn, as a lot of the cards in his hand are 2 mana. But we'll see what he wants to do in combat here.
Yeah, he has this Kaito he'd really like to get down, but all these insect tokens jumping in front of his attackers are making that quite difficult. Okay, but
he does have a Spyglass Siren, so he's able to make some efficient use of his mana at least this turn. Able to play the Siren, make a token, and he'll still have a Flood Pitch Drowner. It looks like open up on Sean's end step here.
Things not looking altogether too bad because Sean hasn't really made a lot of headway in terms of trading material with these insect tokens. He's mainly been jump blocking them off to protect his life total. So even though Ben hasn't come out to the fastest start, once he finds these lands, if he's able to start establishing this card advantage, he can pull ahead.
Yeah, Sean's plan has been to just survive as long as possible, take these Overlords down, and that's what he's doing. But they're still a ways away, sort of in real terms, of by the time you actually attack with that one, even that it's at 1 counter and get more insect tokens out of it. Ben could do a lot of work by then, and now it looks like he's picked up a nowhere to run. So he could, through a variety of ways here, remove this last token and get very aggressive. And that's what we're going to do.
Yeah. Remove the blocker. I imagine this Jace shrunk the Otter token. And so now Ben can ninjutsu the Spyglass Siren. Come across for some damage either at Sean or at the Jace.
Yeah, this is a decent looking spot here. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, maybe the plan is to ninjutsu the otter token then and leave the flyer. A little bit short of clearing the Jace this way because the Kaido's 3 and the Siren is now 2. But maybe he just wants to deal as much damage up front to Jace as possible. Or upfront damage to the face. Yeah. So these creatures went right at Sean. He's going to fall to 8.
Yeah, and this seems like one of those spots where if you're Sean, board wipe and things maybe look okay. I'll see if you can find a way to answer Kaido, but like your overlords are getting there. You're actually looking at untapping possibly, right? It seems like you're going to untap with your Jace. So you're maybe feeling like you have a path through into this right now, but here's the turn. This is a big turn for Sean.
Okay. Ben surveilled land of the graveyard, and it looks like he kept a hopeless nightmare drawn off the Kaido activation, so he is trying to end this game. Sean, trying to extend it because he knows he's favored going long, starts his turn with a stock up, likely looking for Get Lost. That's what he needs to answer this Kaido. And then the Jace can plus on the Spyglass Siren.
There we go.
He finds it. And now
down to 8 life, but that was a big turn.
Yeah, and the Kaido is really Ben's plan for dealing with this Overlord to -2 and lock it down for a couple turns. And hopefully that was going to be long enough for him to deal lethal with a Kaido attack or 2 and this hopeless nightmare. But with the Kaido gone, I think this game has fallen away from Ben.
So he's got, it's like we got a Drowner.
Okay.
To try to save it for a turn. I think I might have spotted 2 hopeless nightmares, which we start talking about burn. I don't like
Yeah, there's only 2 cards left in Sean Gallagher's hand, so okay. Sean drops to 4, has no hand left.
Beza down. That would have been the perfect catch up for Sean if he untapped, given its life total.
I'm going to see it if Sean opens up a window where this Floodpits Drowner can steal it. He's going to have to lock down the Overlord. I love doing this upkeep. Don't give Sean a chance to draw a counterspell.
Now, there might be some anchorages in there, right?
There's an anchorage in Sean's mana base, or there's 2 in play for Sean, so he has blockers from there. He also is going to have the second Overlord come off. Just draw the land for turn, and he's 1 short of animating and blocking with both 2/3s, but just this Overlord and the anchorage is enough because one of these creatures was shrunk by Jace.
Ben could get into. We start talking about bounce spells and the hopeless nightmares being lines too. This maybe not necessarily. We're going to go exploring with the map tokens. One finds a land, the second finds this town ain't big enough.
Yeah, that's what I think Ben needed to draw for turn. Bounce the Overlord and the hopeless nightmare, make you discard the Overlord.
Yep.
And put you to 2. But he did find Go for the Throat, so that takes out one blocker, but the Restless Anchorage still protects Sean.
Yeah.
These anchorages coming up clutch. Can I activate that demolition field? Oh, he had to think twice in the graveyard. Okay. So we're going to get another card. Oh, interesting that I think he thought twice trying to find a counterspell. And now Unger is able to come across for 3, putting Sean to 1. So a hopeless nightmare or a way to bounce one of the nightmares in play could let Ben steal this game. And we know there's I guess this town that was on top from the maps got shuffled from Demolition Field. So it's a fresh top of the deck for Ben here. Yeah, Ben could have declined to search for a land and left that this town ain't big enough on top of his deck. That could be huge here because this game is really going to come down to 1 or 2 draws.
Yeah, this has been a really, really tight one, back and forth. I didn't know if we'd make it to this point with these overlords all coming down off of their impending.
Yeah, once that get loss landed on the Kaido, I thought this game was over. But I think that the slip up from Sean trying to dig for a counter spell to save his Overlord allowed Ben to get in a few more points of damage, and now he's in a very precarious spot. Yeah, Sean now counting graveyards, thinking about potentially minusing this Jace to draw a few more cards. I think he drew a Day of Judgment for turn. Gonna fire that off. So now
Yeah,
he has,
that's an important one here. It's a start.
oh, and now gonna mill with the Jace.
Okay. If Sean's able to dig out of this one at one life, I mean, this Azorius control deck was secretly one of the best performing decks at the Pro Tour, whatever that was a month ago almost now. And since then it's been kind of refined and picked up by players like Sean, who's been having a great weekend with it here. And Jace has been a big part of it. Look at that.
Well, so now Sean has milled This Town Ain't Big Enough into the graveyard. Oh, he has another Jace for next turn. Looks like Jace on 3 was not enough cards. So Ben needs to find the answer right now. Doesn't have enough time to Storm Chaser's talent back of This Town and then bounce the Hopeless Nightmares next turn. This needs to be Fear of Isolation or This Town Ain't Big Enough, I think.
Six enchantments in play right now for Ben, by the way. This town ain't big enough would unlock obviously access to everything in the game, but it's just funny. There's just the way this deck just builds up value in play.
Yeah, it's just a nowhere to run drawn for Ben Unger. And the second Jace for Sean should mill out the rest of Ben's library and take game 1.
There you go. The Azorius control mill win condition, which is more common throughout Magic history than you might think, to be quite honest.
Yeah, and very common for this deck because if you can establish a Jace early like Sean did and keep plussing it turn after turn after turn, it's like a millstone. You're not immediately getting 3 cards in the graveyard,
Right.
but eventually that extra loyalty with the -X will turn into a milled 3 cards. And Sean was able to turn the corner much faster than a typical Azorius control deck would because of that double Jace mill plan.
Yeah, it feels kind of like the old Nephalia Drown Yard decks, right? In this case, like it just builds up in that Jace one at a time, one loyalty counter at a time until it all comes out at once. All right, let's take a look at these sideboards here. How can Ben grind out even more against blue-white?
So definitely going to want to get a lot of the creature removal out of his deck, especially nowhere to run. And go for the throat, taking out those Overlord of the Mistmoors makes it somewhat effective, but really just wants to be able to fight some of the more powerful cards from control. So negates are going to come in. The duress is going to come in. I think these Tidebinders, Tishana's Tidebinder will come in. It can counter, a Jace activation. It can counter an Overlord trigger, and just gives you a way to play reactively, which is how you want to play against Azorius control. So that is definitely a good card for Ben to have access to. And he may also want this blot out just as a instant speed removal spell that can answer, either a big creature like a Biza or an Overlord, or it can answer a Jace. So nice to have that versatility of the Hero's Downfall style removal instead of just straight creature removal.
Yeah, and I also think you nailed it too with the Tidebinders, is just being able to play at instant speed as much as possible against the deck is going to give you an advantage, right? Because there was really no fear for the blue-white player there to just play Jace. Once I untap with Jace, protect Jace, I know that I can just pick this thing up and activate it, and it's going to get you. With Tidebinders, you at least have some kind of a threat. But of course, the Dimir bounce deck and all of that is now going to run into the blue-white sideboard. So let's see what Sean is working with over here. All right, you see Tidebinders of his own, Authority of the Consoles, Rest in Pieces, Tools, Dissection Tools, Negate, the early removal there with the Smites, another Beza as well. What are you wanting if you're Sean? You have a deck with a lot of, I think, room to cut, right? Room to trim, whether, it's a 3 steps ahead or no more lies or stock up or rise. Any of these things you feel like you can trim down on. What are you wanting to bring in?
I think Tidebinder is good from Sean's side of this matchup as well. There's plenty of triggers in the Dimir bounce deck. There's also
Mhm.
activated abilities to counter. When you counter the Storm Chaser's talent to rebuy this town ain't big enough. When you
Yeah.
counter Ninjutsu, which is an activated ability of Kaido, they actually return the creature as part of
Yes.
the cost, but then the Kaido doesn't enter. So you get everything with the Tidebinder there. You effectively bounce their attacker and keep the Kaido at bay. So I think Tidebinder will be excellent there. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a Kutzel's flanker as just a value way to,
Mhm.
uh, you know, to break up those um, end game loops with this
Yep.
town ain't big enough um, and Storm Chaser's talent. I think that's a big part of the end game for Dimir, and Azorius Control always has to be concerned with the opposing deck's end game. And I like Flanker's ability to do it as opposed to something like, Rest in Peace that kind of costs you a full card. Flanking can get in there and just trade with an Otter, trade with a Flood Pits Drowner, while also giving you that effect. Um, Not a big fan of, honestly, like the rest of the sideboard, but it'll really depend on how Gallagher approaches the matchup. If he
Yeah.
wants to be on more of the Jace plan, the fourth Jace is there. If he wants to be more of just sort of a mid range deck and take over with Biza and Dissection tools, he can lean more in that direction. So, really just comes down to his approach, but the Tidebinders are the big coup for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. And he obviously can, lean on the Day of Judgments would have been great there. He had Overlords, which were good. Day of Judgments would have been great as well. So there's a lot of the main deck that's just already set up in a decent spot here. And I mean, look, he's so deep as we're playing Think Twice. Okay. So he's got a lot of ways to churn through this deck over time if he can just survive. And the deck is stuffed with ways to survive. And
Yeah.
all right, here we are hopping in.
Okay. I see a couple Underground Rivers. I see Enduring Curiosity. Look like 4 lands, Curiosity, and a couple This Town ain't big enough. So while the 4 lands and Curiosity part of that hand are solid, having no early pressure, is a bad sign for Ben. He needs to come out aggressively and make sure that he can close out this game, because if not, the Azorius control deck will take over in the end game or just mill you out with a couple Jaces.
Yeah, and that's obviously we know Sean took the draw last round. And I guess maybe that's one of the concerns when your win condition involves Jace milling, but he does have the ability to at least get there quickly, right? When once you've got the board under control. And that's what he's going to try to do here. Now I spot a shake of the head is what I spot from Ben there. Not a hand he's thrilled with anyway.
Well, he's got a couple lands. I see a Restless Reef and an Underground River. I see Storm Chaser Talon and Kaido.
It looks pretty decent. Now
And
maybe it's just hard pressed about what to put back on the mulligan here.
yeah, I think I also see a Verge. And there's definitely a Hopeless Nightmare and Duress. This actually looks like a very solid
That's
hand
what I thought.
for the
So he
matchup.
must just be debating what to put back here.
Yeah, he just likes them all. He wants to keep 7.
I had the wrong read. He liked them all too much.
Yeah. Does end up putting back a land, the Restless Reef. So, even though having the creature land is valuable against control, he values more having his mana untapped on the early turn so he can be aggressive.
Yeah, that represented his third mana, right, for Kaido. But he just found the island. So rewarded for that decision, it looks like. And now we're going to start things off with a Duress, where we see 5 cards and 2 lands. 5 spells and 2 lands, I should say.
The island is a little awkward because Ben can't also deploy the Hopeless Nightmare, but not as big of a deal. Wants to make sure he gets the Duress fired off so he knows if there's something he should play around to ensure that the Kaido both gets through and stays on the battlefield. And looking at Sean's hand, it's the Elspeth Smite that's going to stop this Kaido. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's the take.
Yeah, because the Tidebinder won't be down in time. Of course, being 3 mana, it will only have 2 mana for Sean when Ben is 3 to bring it in. The Smite being the removal spell that can take place before your creature is unblocked is the only thing that would stop it there. So you nailed it. It's gone, and we'll see if Kaido hits play. It does.
And that's a huge advantage for Ben Unger, going to immediately surveil 2 and draw a card. Now he has pressure, he has card advantage, he has card selection, really everything you need to contend against an Azorius control deck.
Yeah, just a planeswalker is so
Yes.
powerful in general. One that draws you cards, especially. And hey, this one also attacks and blocks. Kaido,
It slices, it dices.
yeah, that's right, man. It does it all. It's been one of the again, and kind of like we talked about stock up, it feels like Kaido came out in Duskmorn and people weren't talking about it as much as they were talking about some of the other stuff in the set. But it didn't take too long after that for people to realize how powerful it was, and it dominated worlds. And here it is 6 months later, still a key part of the metagame across this deck that is making look really good here. And Kaido's looking extremely good in this particular circumstance against Sean, who is trying to figure out what he's going to do here to get rid of it while also dealing with the rest of the Dimir bounce deck.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Tidebinder on this Hopeless Nightmare trigger. Not so much to like stop the discard, but to get the 3/2 down so Sean
Right.
can pressure the Kaido. But instead is patient and now might tag the Storm Chaser's talent.
Yeah, would be rewarded if that's the case, because then you get to keep the blocker off the field here.
Yeah. And with the Restless Anchorage in place, Sean has a potentially lethal attack for the Kaido. But Sean, once again, being patient with the Tidebinder, lets the Otter enter.
It might be this town ain't big enough for Ben, and if it is, that means Kaido's going to be well protected. Think about it, just the instep Tidebinder anyway. Okay.
Yeah, I think it was potentially waiting for something better, didn't find it, and now has to contend himself with just a vanilla 3/2.
Oh, wow. Okay, just takes it, doesn't go for the chump. He's going to keep that creature around. Here comes the Overlord for Sean. So, all right, he's threatening the ability to multiple ways to attack Kaido down next turn.
Yeah. Sean's saying, I can play this mid-range game too. I have very powerful threats.
Here we go.
This Tony big enough deals with one of the insects and rebuys Ben's Hopeless Nightmare. Sean is at 10. That's something to be aware of. This Hopeless Nightmare will drop him to 8.
The damage from these Hopeless Nightmares has been kind of one of the unsung, I don't even think hero is the right word here, to be fair. But what are the unsung parts of these enchantment decks, especially we've watched Ben play over the last several rounds, just really wearing his opponent down, working well with the Kaido plan of being aggressive.
Yeah, and now because it makes Sean lose life, it allows Ben to surveil 2 and draw a card if he wants to before he decides on what attacks to make. Could find another this town to clear away that other insect. Would be excellent. Normally you have to connect with the Kaido and then you do your drawing post combat, but another little micro synergy that's baked into these bounce decks.
Yeah, looks like Ben counted it up, thinking it through. It's a Fear of Isolation. Pick up a Nightmare. Play a Nightmare.
And so now the Otter has been pumped twice by Prowess, so Sean should have dropped to 6 from the second Nightmare and then take 3. He should be at 3 life here. And Ben also has the Fear of Isolation to trade for Tidebinder if it tries to attack down the Kaido.
All right, temporary lockdown from Sean.
Yeah, and Ben knew about this. And this is going to take out his entire board because it does not take out the Tidebinder.
Right.
But if he finds that this town ain't big enough and can bounce the lockdown, he gets to re-trigger everything.
All right, so Sean digging for counter magic to that, digging for a way to finish the game here. Not sure exactly what he's taking here, but stock up is a great way to find whatever he's looking for. And Tidebinder getting in there, knocking Ben down. Just a land off the top for Ben.
Yeah, very narrow range of cards left in Ben's deck that are relevant at this point in the game. But with Sean at 4, any of that narrow band will turn this game around.
Another stock up, okay.
Yeah, if you're Sean, it's just dig for counter spells and life gain. That's what I need. If I
Yeah.
can find Biza and
There
and a
we go.
land.
All right, that probably is the official corner.
Yeah,
Well,
this
it's been turned, but there you go. That slams the door shut. Ben Unger extends the hand. Sean Gallagher picks it up with Azorius control, moving to 6-1-1 here in Madison.
Yeah, unfortunate for Ben to have those weak tiebreakers at 6-1. Wasn't able to get the handshake like he wanted, and then is taken down in the final round. So he will have to content himself with a 6-2 finish, likely in the top 16. Still a good amount of money and NRG points,
That's right.
but not the top 8 that he wanted.
Yeah, kind of a tough ending for Ben there, but still a great tournament overall. We're actually going to try to pick up an interview with the winner there off that match, Sean, on his Azorius control deck. Get the lowdown between who wants to play the control deck at a tournament when people were playing mono red. We'll talk to him about that. But hey, Azorius control looked pretty good. Like I said, it actually was one of the best performing decks at the Pro Tour. It didn't top 8. It didn't necessarily draw any of the big headlines, but it put up a very good win rate as kind of a catch-all answer. And we saw Sean's deck with 3 Jace in the main deck and milling being a win condition. Hey, Azorius control. If you're a fan, this is exactly what you like out of that archetype.
Yeah, it really was. I think it was Eli Cassis and some other players piloting it at the Pro Tour. Just fell a little bit short of that top 8, which can happen in mixed format events.
Right.
But has picked up in popularity in the coming weeks as players have recognized how powerful this deck can be in a format dominated by Gruul, Esper Pixie, and a Domain. It matches up pretty well against all 3.
Yeah, we saw that temporary lockdown just remove the whole board that the deck had put together. So let's go down. Hey, Sean, we just watched that match. That was a great finish, a great game. Congrats on the win.
Yeah, thanks. I got pretty lucky that his duress wasn't super backbreaking. The choice between the smite that was countering his Kaido or the lockdown was like probably a pretty tough choice from his side. So the duress was like good, but not good enough, I think. So that was nice.
Yeah, talk about your choice to bring Azorius control, right? This is a field where a lot of people are just playing Gruul, going really aggressive. People are playing Domain, they're going big, ramping, and you're the one playing counter spells. What led you to Azorius control this weekend?
Yeah, so I mean, my track record is always playing blue-white, and I was at the PT 2 weeks ago, or whenever it was, and I played mono-white. That's the deck I really like in this format, the mono-white control deck, and let me tell you, that deck has a bad Domain matchup. So
that it does.
Yeah, I expected to play a lot of Domain. So as you can tell, I mean, I have the Tide Binders and the Jaces, which is nice. So that's been good. And I just always like playing blue-white. About a year ago in February, I won the Energy Showdown with blue-white with Disruption Protocol and Deduce in my deck. So I'm just always playing blue-white, whether it's good or not.
Yeah, you're one of those. You're a control game.
One of those sickos for sure.
Yeah. So let me ask you. I've looked into this control deck, and there are builds like the one you're playing with Overlord of the Mistmoors, and there are builds that are a little bit more counterspell heavy and playing Hornlock Whale. Have you tried out those builds? Do you have any strong feelings about them either way?
Yeah, I mean, Horned Locked Whale, I think, is a card that's really good if you're playing like 3 or 4 of them. Multiple 6/6s is hard for a lot of like mid-range and aggro decks to beat, but the first 6/6 I don't really think matters. I mean, your first Overlord dies a lot. Your first Horned Lock Whale probably will die a lot too. So I'm not a huge fan of that card. I mean, the one in the Lagoon Breach, I love that name, but the Lagoon Breach effect of Horned Lock Whale is pretty effective. But now that we have Ride's End, as you can tell, I'm just maxed out on all the 2-mana removal spells. Ride's End does a good enough job a lot of the time.
Right. And then the other thing I noticed you've opted for Think Twice. This is another point of contention in Azori's control list.
Yeah.
Some players play Deduce, some play Think Twice. Tell me about what goes into that decision.
Yeah, I mean, there's the small consideration of I have a lockdown in my deck and I don't want to against the aggro decks deduce into lockdowns. There's that consideration. I also just like Think Twice the art more. I'm just kidding. It's mainly for the lockdown consideration. Also, there is value in it's a card I can discard to Hopeless Nightmare, which comes up every once in a while. But yeah, it's mainly just for the lockdown consideration, which against red is my main game plan of removal spell or Think Twice on 2 into lockdown on 3. So it just fits that curve a little bit better.
Okay.
Well, it's been a great day for you so far.
Yeah, it worked out really well. I hit all the matchups I wanted except for Omniscience one time. Their new tech is like, I'm not gonna say unbeatable, but Cavern of Souls on what's the card? Grand Abolisher. That one's tough to beat. I'm gonna be honest. So.
We caught that one on. We didn't see Grand Abolisher at the battlefield, but we did catch the deck earlier on camera. It's been nice. It's been so. What matchups do you like with the deck?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much any deck where my rides end and get lost are like reasonable cards. So, Red Gruul, those are fine matchups. My deck is pretty tuned to beat Domain. So the top contenders of the format, I'm pretty excited about. Pixies is like, I mean, you just saw me play against the Bounce deck, the Oath of McNamara deck. Like, I have 4 Overlords helps that matchup a lot. Lockdown's pretty good. So pretty much anywhere, like, any of the top decks, I really just want to know what my opponent's deck does. If I play against a deck where my opponents, I don't know what their cards do, I'm probably going to lose. So my deck's really just tuned to beat the top of the meta is all.
Yeah, well, it's worked out so far. So congrats on the run, and good luck the rest of the weekend.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it. I'll be running back Blue-White Yorion tomorrow. So hopefully I'll be back in the booth then too.
Love it. We'll see. I appreciate it, Sean.
Yep.
What a pickup there in the win. And we are heading into, I think we have a backup match perhaps for round 8 here, as we have one more top 8 match. Top 8 winning in, I think, coming up.
Yeah, one more spot in the top 8 left to be decided. This is a match between, let me pull it up, Alden Cates and Matthew Holderness. So Holderness playing mono red and Alden Cates on Domain Zur. Now
these decks could not be more opposite ends of the format.
they can't. And that generally means good things for mono red. One of the reasons that mono red is picked back up relative to Gruul is that being more aggressive, being lower curved, and more consistent with only one color of mana makes it better against Domain.
Alden Cates does have the draw, being on the play here at least, so how's that working out for him?
Yeah,
and no 1 or 2 drops out of.
Very, very slow draw for Matthew here. Yeah, just a lightning strike on the end step for turn 2. So things going very well for Alden Cates. He would love to snag a game 1 win and then side in all of his anti-aggro cards, knowing that he only needs to get 1 of the final 2 to take down this match.
Gosh, and having the rides in for your mono red opponent tapping out on turn 3 is a pretty good spot to be. As long as Alden has lands to keep playing this game. Like, imagine we just have an Overlord here. And we do. Yeah, this is pretty clinical, honestly, from the Domain deck. If you removal into, Beanstalk into removal into Overlord, the card advantage engine is going. Now that you have some creatures in play, you're at a safe 15-point life total. Matthew is going to be hard-pressed to find a way out of this one. He's just passing again. I don't know if we just flooded out over here or what happened on this one.
I mean, this is closed deck list. This is game 1. Potentially, Matthew didn't know the matchup and kept a hand that was better in, say, like the red mirrors, and got punished. But yeah, this is not going very well for the Mountain Gamer. Really, the last step to this puzzle for Alden Cates is going to be Zur, and he might not even need it. If Matthew's hand is as bad as it seemed in these first 4 turns, these Overlords could just clean up the game once they come off impending.
Yeah, we've been talking a lot about Zur. I don't know if we can pull it up on the screen while we work through these, the end of this one. But Zur has been just the top end of the Domain deck that is most difficult for many decks to interact with and beat. It's been very powerful. You see it there, the 3-mana 1/4 flyer, enchantment creatures you control have Death Touch, Lifelink, Hexproof. But here's the big thing. For 2 mana, target non-aura enchantment you control becomes a creature with base power toughness equal to its mana value. All of your enchantments, they can become whatever you want them to be. That takes care of the board. You just build a board out of nowhere. You swing. They have lifelink. It protects your life total. Zur really, really filled out these decks, and here it is, right on time. And Matthew picks his cards up immediately.
You spoke it to the top of Alden's deck.
I guess so.
You were speaking so poetically, waxing on about Zur, that it just floated to the top of the deck and said, "Here I am. Time to end the game."
Like it when it works. Things work out on time. Onto the sideboard here, mono red deck. What do we do?
Okay, checking out the sideboard here. It's the 4 copies of Sunspine Links. That's step 1. This is far and away the best card against Domain, and Matthew's come prepared for that matchup with the full 4 copies. From there, the rest of the sideboard is basically a bunch of removal spells. So you got to decide which removal spells you really want. Ideally, they'll be removal spells that go upstairs, so you can use them as reach if you need them. But having a few that can answer a mid-game Biza, like Lithomantic Barrage, or potentially an early Overlord of the Haunt Woods, if you need to do that with like Witchstalker Frenzy, could be relevant. The other thing is that you would prefer to have some instant speed answer to Zur.
Right.
So you could take out a Zur before an enchantment creature can connect in combat. So Witchstalker Frenzy, Lithomantic Barrage are your options for playing those roles. It'll just come down to how many of those kinds of removal spells Matthew wants in his deck versus burn spells that can go to the face.
Yeah, because even if you answer Zur with, a sorcery speed removal spell, if it's able to come down and activate immediately and just get one life linking hit through, it can make a big difference. Obviously, when you're playing mono red, I want to point burn at your face with Hired Claw and Heartfire Hero. All right, let's take a look at the Domain sideboard here, where you're going to want those anti-aggro cards, which, a lot of your main deck is already built towards that. But we look at the sideboard, and maybe we want some more.
Yeah, 3 copies of Lockdown in the main. We don't see the 4th in the sideboard. So I'm mainly looking at the Obstinate Bagelofts.
Right.
Normally you see it in the sideboard for Hopeless Nightmare matchups, but just casting that card against an aggro deck, perfectly serviceable. The rest of the sideboard, not great. Maybe Kate's wants a negate or two to counter those late burn spells, but you don't want to draw that card early.
When you see somebody at the top tables whose deck is got either a bunch of cards for a particular matchup, they're ready for it. Or if you see someone's deck at the top tables with no cards for a particular matchup in the sideboard or very few, they were also ready for it, either because they've given up on it or because their main deck is pretty well stacked against it. And I think that's kind of where the Domain deck checks in.
Yeah, the other option I'm looking at is potentially Paw Patch formation.
Mm-hmm.
It can make a food that gains you a little bit of life and draw a card. Not the best mode, but there are many mono red lists that sideboard Case of the Crimson Pulse for matchups like this. So Kate's might come prepared with an extra disenchant for potential cases, even though we know there are none in Matthew's sideboard.
All right. Well, I think we have the next game we can hop on down to here. Remember, both of these players playing for the shot at the top 8 here in RG Showdown in Madison. So Zur Domain, Alden Cates on your right, Matthew Holderness, mono red aggro on the left, who hopes to have a mono red aggro deck that does some aggro things this game.
Yeah, and he's going to be doing it on 6 cards, having taken a mulligan. I think he's just considering which card to tuck right now. And I didn't get a great look at his hand. I saw a Burst Lightning. I think there's a Witchstalker Frenzy there. So that's a lot of non-creatures. Looks like the Frenzy is going to the bottom. And it does tell me that Matthew's kept in a mix of, burn spells and more hard removal spells.
All right, and this is what you want it to look like. Turn 1 Monastery Swift Spear and get the action going.
And looks like I see a Tishana's Tidebinder in Kate's hand. Those coming in to stop Sunspine Links. There's some other triggered abilities you can counter, but the main one is those Linkses. Early Monastery Swift Spear for Matthew, so already a better start than he had in game 1. And Alden, no turn to Beanstalk, does have a Get Lost, though, so they're going to be looking to cast that either on the Swift Spear or a better target if Matthew gives him one.
Yeah, he was singing through that turn, I was going to say no blocks, no effects. I'll take the 1. Okay. Nice and easy. Wow, I guess that must have just been a pass from Matthew.
Yeah, I think the Swift Spear is his only creature.
Wow, okay.
So Alden untaps on turn 3 under no pressure. Would love to have an Overlord of the Hauntwoods here to get a little ramp down, but I don't think he has one. And doesn't even have the second green source if he did. So just going to pass with that Tidebinder up.
Found a basic island for the turn, which gives him a 4th land, but not a second green. Tidebinder could be good. All right, the Sanctuary for Matthew here. I suppose that's a creature at some point.
Probably at the end of Alden's turn.
Gosh, unless it's not. Let's see what Alden does here. I think he does have, if he's got an Overlord, he probably just goes for it no matter what. He still has the Tidebinder. It's the Overlord. Zay could Tidebinder the trigger on the land. All right, well, this is still kind of the same spot. Yeah, and there it is. It does get turned into a creature, but the same spot more or less we were in last game. It's turn 4, turn 5, and Matthew's opponent is at a high life total with tokens in play. Domain, just no problems here as Holderness's mono red deck just kind of fails to get going.
Yeah, but we've seen out of Gruul how these red decks can have very explosive turns, and Soulstone Sanctuary is a mouse. So if Holderness can find something like Manifold Mouse and a Monstrous Rage, he could end this game in a hurry, even from a very high life total for Alden Cates.
Yeah, Rockface Village off the Explore there. That at least will give, if you're going to draw a land, that's probably the one you want to draw. All right, and Emberheart on top.
Okay, so Alden will have to consider that and potentially hold up removal for it next turn. And unfortunately for Matthew, hitting a land off of one of those 2 Explorers means that these 2 insects can double block the Soulstone Sanctuary and take it out. So he's going to need some other form of pump or removal to keep his Sanctuary around. We know he has a Burst Lightning, so also had a Rage.
Monstrous Rage is probably the best one here, right? That will allow him to force through some damage.
Yeah, so it should be 5 coming across here. It'll be 7 power Sanctuary with 2 toughness from the 2 insects. That'll drop Cates to 12.
Okay, well, all things considered, if you're Matthew, this isn't a terrible spot. I mean, that said, you probably also feel fine if you're Alden, and now we've, that's a temporary lockdown. That's not the Tidebinders. That's not going to do much. You're just trying to survive, I guess, till that Overlord comes off suspend. But you actually are under maybe a little bit of pressure here that you're not super well equipped to deal with, at least from what we can spy in his hand.
His hand is 2 Tishana's Tidebinders that are too small to trade with the now 5/5 Soulstone Sanctuary, and 2 cards that say non-land permanent on them in Temporary Lockdown and Leyline Binding. So a very awkward hand to answer this Soulstone Sanctuary, and we could see a very poor draw for Matthew Holderness take down this game too.
Well, and it's Alden had the chance to hold up those Tidebinders, and maybe for the trigger that would have, I guess, basically amounted to kind of a time walk. He went for the Overlord instead, which, I mean, that makes the most sense. It's the most mana efficient on your turn 4. It makes your tokens. It starts it to impend on down as you want it to. But in this particular game, it just didn't really seem to line up against this land. Now, obviously, if Alden finds an answer, he looks like he's in a great spot. But for a draw that seemed a little awkward for Matthew, it's working out, I guess, about as well as he could have hoped for.
Yeah, the Soulstone just came across, so Kate's down to 7. We know Matthew has a Burst Lightning in hand, so this is a lethal attack next turn. And
I think he found a Biza, which is huge here.
Yeah, that is excellent, though. It's still only a 4/5. It won't make any fish.
Yeah,
and it doesn't successfully block the Soulstone Sanctuary. So yeah, gain your 4 life. They're both players are equal on land, so no treasure, and it looks like they're equal on cards. So yeah, just the 4 life. Matthew can just keep on attacking.
Well, Matthew still has a lot of mana open, right? What is he gonna do here?
Yeah, he also has a Witchstalker Frenzy in hand, so he can end a turn, kill the Biza.
Yeah. And then, I mean, I'm not sure that unlocks necessarily outside of whatever he draws. I think I also spot a Burst Lightning, which he has the mana to kick.
Yeah, and we know he has Emberheart Challenger in hand from the earlier Explorers off the map.
He's got 5, yeah.
So this could be a lethal attack.
Yep. Burst Lightning you.
Yeah, just going to kick that
back down to 7.
So yeah, just Emberheart Challenger, attack with 2 creatures. Now my Frenzy costs 2. Kill your Biza, and this isn't 8 points coming across. There needs to be an Elspeth Smite for Alden Cates, and he doesn't have one. Doesn't have any in his deck.
Nicely navigated here by Matthew. We thought his start would never get there. He played 1 creature on turn 1 and it was killed. Just this Soulstone Sanctuary that, as you mentioned, the benefit you get from playing red as opposed to playing Gruul is that you have a more consistent mana base. You're able to do stuff like this, and it certainly paid off in this one.
Yeah. Matthew going to attack. He can now use the Sanctuary for mana, so he still has a red up. Drew a Lynx for a turn, so had to cards to spare there despite the weak start.
Yeah, that was great. Honestly, that was a nice win out of the red deck. It does show how it doesn't always have to just be sort of the mono red you're used to out of Modern, where it's 1-drop, 2-drop, burn spell, burn spell, burn spell. That worked out a little differently, but it still worked out.
Yeah, these red decks are very resilient. They generate a lot of advantage. The maps that the Get Lost gave Matthew were very big. They allowed him to dig through his deck, find some more lands, pump the Soulstone Sanctuary. So yeah, using every part of the Buffalo there. Now he gets himself 1 game for 1 slot in this top 8.
Yeah. All right, here we go. On to game 3. It's all on the line for these 2 players right here. Alden Cates will be back onto the play for this one.
And if you're Matthew, you're just thinking, okay, deck, you did me wrong for 2 straight games. Just show me the goods one time, please.
No kidding. Well, here we go. It seems like a good start. It's a Kired Claw on turn 1.
Yeah, it's the best start he's had all match.
Cates has got, it looks like he didn't have to mull again. He's got lands. He's got spells. Get Lost is held up here. So both players working with plenty of gas here to go back and forth here. It looks like the Claw's going to get in there. He's going to go for it, though. Look at this. And just immediately get it hit by the Get Lost. But so I guess the mana wasted in a sense there for Matthew, and nothing else added to the board. But maybe not as devastating for mono red as you might expect, given how we saw the last game go.
Yeah, still not a great start for Matthew, but he can certainly recover. Lush Portico to play for Cates, so that represents a 2nd green source for any later Overlords. Looks like he has a Forest in hand, so must not be an Overlord there. And he leaves the card on top off the Surveil. So looks like it might be 3 straight games where Alden Cates untaps on turn 4, somewhere north of 15 life.
Yeah, and I guess I'd say it's not an accident, but Matthew hasn't been able to mount more than 1 or 2 creatures in the first turns. Except here we go, though. The Emberheart Challenger will put the pressure back on and force another answer out of Cates. He's got the land, too, so we can explore.
It's not an accident, but it's certainly not the plan.
Yeah, that's right. Monstrous Rage on top is the plan. If you're Matthew, that's a good one to have access to next turn. It's also one that obviously if you're Alden, you play around Monstrous Rage whenever you can, but your opponent knowing you have Monstrous Rage also just changes the game in a way that if you're Matthew, maybe you can take advantage of by taxing him a little bit.
Yeah.
But here we go. Impending the Overlord on turn 4. Blockers down.
This is the turn. We have Monstrous Rage on top. I saw another Monstrous Rage in Matthew's hand. If he has a Manifold Mouse and a land, this game could be over.
Here we go.
Just the Rages themselves will get this Emberheart Challenger up to 10.
Yeah, there's the land, but he's still thinking about it, so maybe not quite as easy as it could.
Yeah.
Oh, talking about.
Think wants to potentially take this land drop back because he's going to Monstrous Rage main phase and wants to play a land if he hits it off Valiant. And yeah, no information gained, so you can take that back.
Hey, look at that.
Land.
He did the math.
So plenty of lands here for Matthew, but notably no utility lands, no Rockies Villages, no Soulstone Sanctuaries, just a pile of mountains. They're beautiful mountains. I like the basic land choice.
Maybe, you want 1 sanctuary among those mountains if you can.
I think those might be Eternal Masters, but they're a classic art. Alden with some very nice, looks like potentially 4 and revised or 4 and fourth. Or maybe just
Yeah,
beta.
I'm not incredibly familiar with all the old ones, but I will say that they look very classic.
Yeah, it does look like English. That might just be beta.
Tap to add. Love that.
Okay.
Before the tap symbol. I mean, that's beta, I think, if that's
Yeah.
what it is. Yeah.
So Emberheart Challenger coming across here. It is currently a 7-5 because of the prowess trigger and the monstrous rage pump.
And we know that there is more to come should Matthew go that direction. But hey, happy to just clear the tokens, force through some damage.
Yeah.
This is still just passing the turn. 3-mana open. Really setting up, it seems like, I guess, maybe for a big combo-ish turn. It's certainly how the last game went.
Yeah, if you know Alden doesn't have a spot removal spell, or at least doesn't have another Get Lost. He would have played one on the end step on turn 3 when Matthew's tapped out. He could have something like a Leyline Binding, but really Matthew here just trying to play around a sweeper. He's saying, you don't have a way, or I don't think you have a way to stop my Emberheart Challenger unless it's a sweeper. So there's no reason for me to extend further into it and give you a means or an opportunity to gain some value. And we do see a Day of Judgment in Alden's hand. So he might be forced to use this as just a 1-for-1 removal spell, which will then leave him vulnerable to another haste creature. Oh, instead has the Zur. And is there a removal
what we
spell
talked
for
about
it?
right here? Zur just immediately turning an enchantment into a creature. It does the thing. Look at that.
Matthew has the Witchstalker Frenzy, but he had to wait for the Overlord to attack before using it.
For the discount.
So still going to get some insects, but not going to get any life. So now Alden is at 11. This is the turn for Matthew. We know he has another Monstrous Rage. Needs to find a Manifold Mouse. Playing the land first probably means he's
looking at something else.
Yeah.
And 3 minutes.
It means he already has plans for all his mana. He doesn't care about what he hits off the Valiant trigger. He has something better. But now he's stopping.
Yeah, he said, well, thinking it through. Wait. Is there something better? Okay. Screaming Nemesis down.
Okay, so now probably going to attack and then wait to see what he wants to do with the Monstrous Rage until after blocks. That's why he plays the land first. And currently we have a 4-4 and a 3-3, so no blocks means you're dead to Monstrous Rage. That's not a tenable play. But yeah, blocking the Screaming Nemesis also isn't good. And so this only prevents 2 damage.
Wow.
And the Burst Lightning deals the other 2. So this should be lethal. So
Matthew has really put together 2 really impressive near combo turns, if you want to look at it that way. But like turns where he puts together 11, 12, 13, 14 points of damage all at once. And of course, Monstrous Rage is a big part of it. But it's not just that. It's all the cards in this mono red deck, leading to that, a handshake from Alden Cates, congratulating Matthew Holderness on winning round 8.
Alden Cates dies with Day of Judgment still in hand against an aggro deck.
Yeah, that's
5 mana. Never had an opportunity to play a Day of Judgment that wasn't just a 1-for-1 removal spell because of the way Matthew navigated that game. Beautiful play.
That was really, really well done. And he'll be rewarded for that because on the other side of this, folks, we have our top 8. That's right. We're coming back to the top 8 here in Madison. The NRG Championship Series Showdown. We'll see you on the other side for some standard top 8 action.